Amer Zahr is an acclaimed Palestinian-American activist, comedian, academic, writer, and law professor. But when you meet him, he'll tell you that first and foremost, he's an activist, and that his academic and comedic work are different tools of his activism. So we'll get into the nitty-gritty of things, but is there anything else that you want folks to know about you and who you are in this moment?
No. I'm Palestinian first. I'm Palestinian, I'm American, I'm Arab, but Palestinian first, and maybe that's just a function of 72 years of occupation, but that's the thing that weighs on me the most.
So, given with your Palestinian background and now your legal training, what role do you think that lawyers play in liberation and in solidarity work? Why did you choose to go to law school as opposed to serving your communities in different ways?
Well, look, law school is different things to different people. That's one of the beauties of law school, is that it can be whatever you want it to be. For some people, it's going to be a ticket to, wealth or a picket fence and a stable life. But the truth is, and I know this sounds, lofty, and people say this all the time, but I really do believe the law is one of the most important, if not the most important and quickest vehicle to social change and even a vehicle for liberation. Right. The truth is, the law has been used for oppression so much in this country. Let's not forget, as we all know, slavery, Jim Crow, all of these things were legal. They weren't illegal, right? They were functions of the law. You had to be white legally in order to become a citizen of the United States from 1790 until 1952. But it was a lot of work within the law to also get past a lot of those things. Well, I'm not sure we're past them, but in order to try to remedy some of those things. And so, yes, I think the law can be a vehicle for liberation, especially in an American context. And so we do need people like you and people who are rooted in justice to be going to law school and be using that as a vehicle for activism and liberation in the future.
As an undergraduate, I took a 2-semester course in constitutional law. And I had not thought about going to law school. I had never known a lawyer. I did not come from a family that had contact with professionals or elites of this sort. My father was a social worker, so it wasn't that. It just was the community, the milieu that I come from really had very marked differences in terms of who you could imagine yourself to be. Mm-hmm. I had difficulty imagining myself just getting through college. And so there was really, I didn't have the idea that in fact there was something beyond that. It was my constitutional law professor who asked me if I was thinking about law school, and I said no. And he said that that he would write me a letter if I decided to apply. And then a friend of mine, we were walking across, I was at San Diego State University. We were walking across, there's a central grassy area in front of the Student Union building. And he said to me that he had come from there and there was a student recruiter from Harvard Law School. And the two of us laughed about this, right? We couldn't imagine what someone from Harvard Law School looked like. And so we went in, and actually it was a Chicano from California. And I remember he was dressed in a tweed blazer. Now this was San Diego. No one dressed that way. Literally, we were in cutoffs and t-shirts, right? And it was just, and so he offered us application forms and they waived the application fee. And it was that serendipitous, a set of experiences
Right.
that result in my applying to Harvard, right? Never thinking that I would get in. I mean, and not knowing anything about I didn't realize how stratified legal education was. I didn't know how remote a possibility that was, right? I mean, so all of that, and because it was outside of my consciousness, I wasn't limited by it,
Right.
right? Because had I known, I probably wouldn't have applied, right? But what motivated me was I was very involved in student politics and highly politicized. I had been in ethnic studies. I had been on student senate. I thought of myself as someone who wanted to have more understanding of the process of law. Just from student senate, right? I would get extremely frustrated or I would feel extremely animated when we could use process to get our aims right. And at one point we controlled the student budget, and we tried to use it for financial aid. So we were doing things that we thought were important. At the same time, there was a lot of emphasis that the Supreme Court was an instrument of liberation. There had been the cases that came after, well, there was Brown, of course, Brown versus the board. There was all of this emphasis on the dismantling of de jure segregation, that it, having witnessed it in my lifetime, right? That legislatures, but particularly courts and federal courts and the Supreme Court could do this, right? And there was this, I'm sure, exaggerated hope that I would be able to use law in that way, right?
I always told one else, remember, you were someone before you got to law school, because law school is a process of trying to break down that person and make a new lawyer. But lawyer and human are not separate, and your values, your intelligence, your talents and skills that you brought with you are still holding you up, and don't let anyone break that down and tell you it doesn't matter. You're smart, and smarter than a lot of the people who are teaching you. So believe that and hold on to what the people before you gave you, people in your genealogy, and you'll do just fine right now. And figure out the places that sustain you. So you might think, oh, I'm going to skip this demonstration. And then you go and you find out that it gives you this spirit of fight and uplift and community that you need to go brief another case tomorrow for contracts. And the connections you make, the people that you will meet in struggle are going to be your lifelong partners in this. And so it's not wasted time. It's really important time figuring out who you can trust in these movements that we're creating to bring about a just world.
And so I think that we arrive at Harvard politicized, to be plunged into classrooms in which there was, and I think this is part of what I talk about in my article, there was and I think that to some extent it's probably true today, a tacit acceptance of a certain kind of a politesse, if you will, some norms that applied to how you conducted yourself in that space, and what you talked about. And I think that to think of the parties in the cases that we were studying as having stories based on their lived experience, and that lived experience was integral to our understanding of the legal issues and the remedies. I mean, that was just, I think there was very little in the classroom that allowed us to make those connections. Part of the way that the status quo is maintained is by silencing questions of power, most particularly racial power. Right. And if law students are instructed not to speak about that because it's so monitored and silenced in the classroom, you come out with a cadre of people who not only don't have the skills for talking about power in explicit terms, and particularly powerlessness, right, or illegitimate power, including racial power, but with a set of values in which it is a breach of norms, it is a breach of those values to, in fact, engage these questions. And I think that a lot of what is going on right now, post George Floyd and his untimely death, is in fact the disruption of these norms, that we must talk about race and institutional and structural racism, right?
I mean, you have to, and I hope 1Ls who are listening to this, you have to immediately get out of the notion that law school has to be this sort of like rat race where everyone is running for the best internship and, for the best high-paying job when you get out. Look, if that's what law school is for you and that's what you want to do, that's great. But don't fall into the trap or the idea that that's what it has to be. It doesn't have to be that, okay? Get yourself out of this idea that you need to, get all A's in your first year of law school so that you can go get an internship at this big law firm. And that is not, you are not going to get the most out of law school, especially at an elite law school. You might as well have gone somewhere else. You're not going to get the most out of law school if that's the way you look at it. You have to look at law school as, first of all, you have scholars there that are only going to be in your life for 3 years if you're lucky, and you're never going to see them again. So you need to take all the advantage that you can of them. And, you have these classes, of course, that you have to take, your first year classes and maybe a couple more. But after that, take classes that are unique and classes that you like and that appeal to your values, because that law school is all about, it's really weird. The sort of boring things that we think we learn in law school, like IRAC and your legal writing class and like what is it called? Identifying the issue. Those things are actually very effective in advocacy, because you can be a real effective advocate if you say, look, none of this other stuff matters. This is what matters. Mm-hmm. This is the issue. This is what we're talking about. So we deal with that in Palestine all the time. Oh, we were there 3,000 years ago. Okay, fine. I mean, so were we. Okay, so, okay. You eat hummus. You say hummus is Israeli. Yeah, that kind of pisses me off. Yeah, that pisses me off. But again, so, I mean, okay. All right, the Bible says this, the Quran says that. Okay, maybe allegedly, but like, okay, so who cares? You know what matters? What matters is that my grandmother told me stories about how she literally got kicked out of her house and she wasn't able to go back. Like, that's it. That's all we're talking about here. Nothing else. But we built a great society with innovation and technology. Okay, good for you. That's fine. That's wonderful. Great. That's not the problem. That's not the issue. And so, we Palestinians, sometimes we fall into that a lot, and by the way, it's the tools of oppressors to try to complicate issues. Oh, it's more complicated than that. No, it isn't. I mean, no, it isn't. No, it isn't. I mean, you think we shouldn't have as much rights as you because we don't have the same skin color or ethnicity or religion. You're not the first people that have ever done that before. You probably won't be the last. It's not that complicated, and it's always wrong. And, real simple. Mm-hmm. And, that should be part of the advocacy you learn in law school, is simplifying issues and then becoming very strong advocates and honing in, right? when people ask me what is law school, I say it is it's the art of, it's the science or the art. I don't know whether it's a science or arts, probably both, but it is the study of what words mean, right? How can you use words and the meaning of words to get you the result that you want? And sometimes that result might be something small, like a civil suit for somebody, but sometimes that may be something big, like changing the OMB classification where white doesn't include Arab Americans anymore, you know, that's something we're going to try to do hopefully soon. And so these kinds of things, and if you look at law school in that simple way, then train yourself. That means becoming an advocate. Train yourself to become an advocate and try to find skills. And I just don't think you find them in a internship in a New York City law firm for 4 months in your first and second summers. I've never seen it work. I've never seen anybody go do those things and come out and change the world. Okay. And so it's important to be loud. And that's why that quote from Edward Said is so important, that he wrote in Representations of the Intellectual, where he said, again, nothing to him is more reprehensible than avoiding speaking truth to power because it might be inconvenient or piss off some other people. Mm-hmm. Well, that's actually the exact time to do it. It's easy to be an advocate when nothing's on the line. You know, it's much more meaningful to be an advocate when maybe everything's on the line. Mm-hmm. And so you need to be willing to take on that kind of responsibility. But people will remember you and your activism, and it's okay, in fact, maybe preferable, if those in power don't like you. Like, it's okay. You don't need to be at the seat of power, because most of the time it means that you don't have power. So you don't need to be at the seat of power. I always tell people in political activism, I tell them, don't try to take a picture with a politician. Do something that makes that politician want to take a picture with you. Because trust me, they need you more than you need them.
Message to students that the frustration with Harvard and the frustration I mean, the issues of the inequalities around legal education, you know, predate those of us who were among the firsts there, right? I mean, this has been a concern for a very long time. And I mean, I think that part of the reality of putting together that history is that while we have been successful at disrupting the sort of the evenness of the messages that the institution puts out, right? We have been less successful in achieving our goals, in trying to diversify the faculty, and trying to really alter the curriculum in ways that would address race and class and other inequalities more directly, you know. So I think it's just important that we keep in mind that there has been a lot of work that has been done, and yet the institution is amazingly elastic and just able to absorb that and just be as elite as it ever has been. I guess what I'd like to say is that I'm really grateful to all of you for the work that you've done. I mean, there's really a vindication for those of us from so long ago, you know, to now see, I mean, certainly the young woman that arrived at Harvard Law School so many years ago, the young me, would have liked to have known of Victoria Lee. Would have liked to have known that there was a group that was doing disorientation. I would have liked to have, or the young me would have liked to have had the opportunity to have student peers, like those of you that arrive knowing critical race theory, having the skills and the vocabulary and the exposure that you have. And I think that one of the things that I learned being there was that I learned more from the other students than I learned from the faculty.
At Harvard Law School long ago wrote something called Legal Education as Training in Hierarchy or something like that. And he said, there are only about 5 to 10 identifiable skills you learn in the first year. They're important skills, how to read a case, how to pull out a holding, how to make counter arguments, understanding the mutability and manipulability of legal rules, extracting rules from principles, blah, blah, blah. That's an important skill. But the really important stuff is understanding how the world works, the economics, the politics, the history of racism. All of that I taught myself. That was not taught in law school. So you do have a continuing obligation of self-education. And that includes teaching yourself radical political economy, history, legal history, as it applies to poor and working people, and particularly the history of race and racism, which if you had a standard elite education, you were deprived of the information you need in that realm. And the theory, if we don't figure out a way to pick up the pieces of a broken world and fix it, you may not be leaving a livable planet to your children. So there is no option to not be a political person. Yes, I'd like to say thank you and many blessings to students at Harvard who are thinking about taking responsibility for their own education and for using their privilege. It is a wonderful thing that you got that letter of admission to Harvard Law School because it certifies you as a smart person. You don't have to worry about people not thinking you're smart anymore. And you can go out and, I'm not endorsing that process of certification, but it's a reality in our social structure. And it means you have power that you can deploy on behalf of others. So I congratulate you and I thank you for your choice to use what you have to bring about a better world.
Thank you, Professor Matsuda.